There were 12 of us in that cabin. I counted 11 faces the next morning, and nobody could remember who was missing. I've spent years trying to convince myself it was just my cousins playing an elaborate prank. But I know what we saw in those Alabama woods. I know about the smell of copper and ozone, the backwards-facing figures in the trees, and the thing that wore our faces and walked among us. I was 16 then, a city kid from Chicago visiting family down in Huntsville. I didn't believe in monsters. I didn't know about the Goatman, or why the locals never went too deep into those woods after dark. But I learned. God help me, I learned. I never wanted to go camping that weekend. Being a 16-year-old city kid from Chicago visiting family in Alabama was already pushing my comfort zone way past its limits. The humidity alone was killing me, making my clothes stick to my skin in ways I wasn't used to. My uncle owned this huge stretch of land near Huntsville, beautiful property with a big house and several hunting trailers scattered throughout the woods. The kind of place where you could walk for hours and never leave the family land. My cousins wouldn't stop teasing me about being a city boy. Bet you ain't never killed your own dinner before, they'd joke, watching me squirm as they prepared to slaughter a pig for our camping trip. They were right. I hadn't. The closest I'd come to hunting was picking up packaged meat at the grocery store. But I tried to be a good sport about it, even when they made me help with the chickens. We spent the whole day getting ready. My cousins knew what they were doing. They'd grown up doing this kind of thing. They gathered supplies like they were checking items off a mental list they'd memorized years ago. Food, tools, sleeping bags, coolers full of drinks, and enough snacks to feed an army. They even brought extra flashlights because, as my cousin Rooster said, "City boy probably ain't used to real dark." The whole time we were preparing, I kept getting this weird feeling in my gut, like something was telling me to make up an excuse and stay behind. But I didn't want to look like a coward. If I'd only listened to that instinct. The moment we pulled up to the campsite, something felt wrong. The air had this strange electric quality to it, like right before a massive storm when everything gets still and heavy. There was this smell too, sharp and metallic, like ozone. My cousins didn't seem to notice it, or if they did, they didn't say anything. They just started unpacking like nothing was off. "Let's hit the creek before it gets too late," one of them suggested, and we all agreed. The water would at least wash away some of the Alabama heat that was making us all sticky and irritable. We'd been down there maybe an hour, splashing around and actually having a good time when they showed up. The old man and his son just appeared out of nowhere, stepping out of the bushes like they'd materialized from the thick Alabama air. The father had this weathered face, the kind you get from spending your whole life outdoors, and a shotgun tucked casually in the crook of his arm like it was just another limb. His son looked about our age, maybe 16 or 17, with that same outdoor-bred toughness starting to show in his features. "Y'all be careful out here," the old man said, his eyes scanning the tree line like he was looking for something. "Need to stick together. There's been something in these woods lately." The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he knew exactly what that something was but didn't want to speak it out loud. His son, who introduced himself as Tanner, ended up staying with us when his dad left. We were a pretty big group by then. 5 of my cousins, 4 of their friends, and me. 6 boys and 5 girls total, all around our age. We spent the afternoon playing football, telling jokes, and trying to forget about the old man's warning. But that smell, that sharp ozone tang, it never quite went away. As the sun started sinking behind the trees, Tanner mentioned that his family's property bordered my uncle's land. "I could probably camp out with y'all if my dad says it's okay," he said. "Our house ain't but a 20-minute walk from here." My cousin Rooster offered to walk with him, and one of the girls, I think her name was Sarah, decided to tag along. The rest of us stayed behind, getting the campfire going and breaking out the s'mores supplies. Someone had brought a couple of beers, and we were all feeling pretty good, laughing and joking around the fire. That's when the smell changed. The ozone scent got stronger, but now there was something else mixed in with it. Something metallic and thick, like dried blood stuck in the back of your throat. "Y'all smell that?" my cousin Junior asked, but before anyone could answer, we heard them coming back. Not walking, running. Rooster, Tanner, and Sarah burst into the clearing, their faces white as sheets. They didn't even slow down, just ran straight into the nearest trailer. When we finally got them calmed down enough to talk, what they told us made my blood run cold. They'd seen something in the woods, or rather, someone. Multiple someones standing between the trees with their backs turned to the path, just standing there, completely still until they weren't. "They moved wrong," Sarah kept saying, her voice shaking. "They moved all wrong, like they were trying to remember how to do it." Tanner just kept mumbling about how he should have taken his dad's rifle when he offered it. That's when things started getting really messed up. We were all sitting in the trailer trying to make sense of what was happening when my cousin started counting heads. His face went pale and he counted again and again. "There were 11 of us," he said slowly, "but I remember setting out 12 plates for dinner. I remember thinking we had enough hot dogs for everyone to have 2 each. 24 total, but we only used 22. The realization hit us all at once. There had been 12 people in our group. Someone or something had been sitting with us, eating with us, laughing with us, and none of us could remember who it was. It was like trying to remember a dream. The harder we tried to picture the extra person, the more it slipped away from us. Junior started talking about something he'd heard from a native kid at his school. "It's the Goatman," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It gets in with groups of people, pretends to be one of them. Sometimes it just watches, but sometimes..." We told him to shut up. We didn't want to hear about some local legend, not when we were already scared out of our minds. But he kept going, telling us how the Goatman could shapeshift, how it liked to torment people before it. Well, he didn't finish that thought. I didn't know then what I learned years later when I had a Menominee roommate in college. He told me about similar creatures in his tribe's traditions, how the Goatman was like the Wendigo, and how even talking about it could draw its attention. He said it was bad medicine to speak of such things, and after what I experienced, I believe him. The next night was even worse. The copper smell came back stronger than ever, so intense it made one of the girls throw up. We were all huddled in the trailer, counting each other obsessively when someone noticed movement outside. Through the window, we could see a figure standing by the fire pit. It looked like Kira, one of the girls who'd left earlier that day to go back to town. She was just standing there, back turned to us, completely motionless. "That's not Kira," Sarah whispered. "She left. I watched her leave. She's not here." The woods had gone completely silent. No crickets, no owls, no rustling leaves, nothing. Just that thing wearing Kira's shape, standing there like a photograph of a person rather than a person itself. Someone suggested we call out to it, but nobody wanted to make a sound. We all had the same terrible feeling. If we called out to it, it might turn around, and none of us wanted to see its face. The air got colder inside the trailer, even though it was a warm September night. We could see our breath, little clouds of vapor that hung in the air too long before dissipating. The smell of copper was overwhelming now, making our eyes water and our throats burn. Around 11 p.m., everything went to hell. The copper smell suddenly changed, becoming something worse, like burning blood and singed hair. Then the knocking started. Not normal knocking. It was more like clawing, like something with hands that weren't quite hands was trying to get in. And then it spoke. God, that voice. It sounded like those videos of pets whose owners teach them to talk. All wrong cadence and forced sounds that shouldn't come from a living throat. "Let me the fuck in," it said, the words coming out jerky and mechanical, like it was reading from a script it didn't understand. Reese, Tanner's cousin who'd joined us with more rifles, was the first to act. He raised his gun and fired 3 shots into the air. "In the name of Jesus Christ, go away!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. The response came from the woods by the river, a sound I'll never forget as long as I live. It was like a woman screaming and a cat yowling, all mixed together into something that shouldn't exist. We could hear brush moving, something crawling through the underbrush toward us. Reese fired again, this time toward the sound, and we heard the thing retreat, its inhuman shrieks fading into the darkness. What Tanner told me 2 days later made everything even worse. While we were all finally falling asleep that night, he'd been sitting watch with his rifle. He saw something, come out of the bathroom and lie down on the floor with the rest of us. He counted the sleeping bodies. 1, 2, 3, 9. There were only supposed to be 8 people in the cabin. The thing must have been slipping in and out through the bathroom window all along, probably for days, just waiting for us to let our guard down. Tanner said he stayed awake all night watching it. Sometimes it would stand up and do this weird, jittery movement, like it was laughing but didn't quite know how. Then it would lay back down, perfectly still, too still to be sleeping, too still to be human. When we left the next morning, it walked with us. All the way back to Tanner's house, it stayed at the back of the group. Before it disappeared into the woods, it turned and looked Tanner right in the eyes. He said its face was wrong, like someone had tried to draw a human face from memory and got all the proportions just slightly off. If you've made it this far, you're probably checking your surroundings right now, maybe counting the people in your room. I don't blame you. I still do the same thing, especially when I catch that faint smell of copper in the air. This happened 15 years ago, but I still get messages from people who've had similar experiences in those Alabama woods. If you've encountered something like this, or if you know more about the Goatman, leave a comment below. But be careful what you share. Sometimes talking about these things can attract unwanted attention. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more true horror stories from my life. Though honestly, nothing quite compares to what happened in those woods. And if you're ever camping near Huntsville, well, maybe just count your group, then count again and again. And if the numbers don't match, run. Sleep tight, everyone. And remember, not everything that looks human is human.